Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first SPSS and Excel exercise. I look forward to doing these with you. I really enjoy teaching this to my students, and I think some of them actually enjoy it as well. I think in this first exercise and probably a little bit of the next one, they will last just a slightly longer than they will typically in the future, mostly because I need to sort of introduce you to the programs that will be using so you can get a good foundation and understanding of those programs so we can actually start performing statistical analysis and learning how to manipulate data and all that good stuff. All right, so I'm for the Excel, I like to show let's see, I like to show these videos that I have recorded. They were produced by someone else, but I find them really convenient to use because you can play the videos and kind of speed them up a little bit. If you can, you're a fast learner. If you know Excel pretty well already and you feel really comfortable with it, you can fast forward through this part. It'll be, this portion will last maybe 10, 15 minutes. But for the rest of you who want to listen, I have these videos set to play. I have them speeded up just a little bit, but if you want to watch them later, you can also speed through this part of it and watch them for yourself later. And you'll find a link to it in the module called Excel for Beginners. And there's 4 videos there. And so I'm just going to go ahead and start playing. I believe I have these. Yes. I speeded them up to about a time and a half. So you might want to slow them down if you need to hear it a little more slowly and listen to them for yourself. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play for each of these, and I'll see you in a moment.
Goodwill Community Foundation, creating opportunities for a better life. Every worksheet contains thousands of cells where different columns and rows intersect. You'll need to know how to work with these cells in order to enter and edit data. Every cell has its own name based on its location, sometimes called a cell address. In this example, the cell I've selected is where column D and row 6 intersect, making the cell address D6. The address also appears in the name box above the worksheet. To select a cell, just click it. You can even use the arrow keys on your keyboard to navigate between cells instead of clicking with your mouse. To select more than one cell at a time, known as a cell range, click and drag, and the entire range will be highlighted. You can enter lots of things into a cell. For example, all of mine contain text, but they can contain advanced properties too, like formulas, functions, and formatting elements. For now, I'd just like to show you the basics. We'll start with inserting content into a cell. This person has confirmed that she completed part 2 of the training, so I'm going to select cell F9, then type in X. It appears in the cell and in the formula bar, where you can also enter or edit the contents of your cell. In fact, I'm going to take this opportunity to change the X to a capital X, so it's consistent with the rest of the list. Now for the next person, Walter. Although it looks like I've made a mistake, he's on the list twice, both here and here. I'm just going to clear the contents of the extra row by selecting the cells, then clicking the clear command on the ribbon, and choosing Clear Contents. You can also use backspace or delete on your keyboard. So let's take a look at what that did. It cleared the contents of the cell, but the row is still there. That's okay. If you want to delete the cells altogether, all you have to do is click the delete command instead. That actually removes the cells from the worksheet, causing the cells underneath to shift up and fill in the gap. Just remember that there's a difference between clearing and deleting cells, so you don't accidentally delete cells that you want to keep. Now I'd like to show you a way to save time by copying and pasting content. For example, I need to mark the rest of the people who completed part 2 of the training. Start by clicking the cell you want, then click Copy on the ribbon. You'll see a dashed box that appears around the copied cell. Next, select the cells where you want the content to go, then click Paste. To access more paste options, open the drop-down menu here. These commands will come in handy if you're copying and pasting cells that contain formulas or advanced formatting. You can also get to these commands by right-clicking in the worksheet. For example, to cut and paste, select your cells, then right-click, and choose Cut. The original content will disappear as soon as you paste it in a new location. There's also a drag and drop technique for moving cells from one place to another. To drag and drop, start by selecting your cells, then place your cursor on an outside edge. As you can see, it turns into a symbol with 4 arrows and a pointer. Now click, hold, and drag the cells wherever you want them to go, and release your mouse, and the cells have moved to their new location. To mark the rest of the people who've completed part 3, I'm going to use one of my favorite techniques, filling in cells with the fill handle. You can fill vertically or horizontally by selecting the cell you want to use, then clicking and dragging the square in the bottom right corner. The fill handle can also be used to continue a series. For example, numbers, dates, and other information that's listed in sequential order. See what happens when I use the technique on my header row? It continues the series up to part 6. Now you know the basics, including insert and delete, cut, copy, and paste, and other time-saving techniques. Everything you need to know to work with cells in Excel.
All right, so those were some basic techniques that you can use when using Excel, how, dragging and dropping and manipulating data. There is, let's see, let's go to the next one and we'll see how we can use formulas, which will come in handy for this class, of course, in Excel. All right.
Goodwill Community Foundation, creating opportunities for a better life. Remember using formulas to calculate math problems in school, like 2 plus 2 equals 4, or 2 pizzas times $10 equals $20? You can use these same formulas to work with numerical data in your spreadsheets, just like you would use a calculator. Excel uses standard operators for math equations, like a plus sign for addition, a minus sign for subtraction, an asterisk for multiplication, a forward slash for division, and a caret for exponents. You're probably used to seeing equations like 5 plus 5 equals, but in Excel, the equal sign comes first. That's because the cell itself contains, or is equal to, the formula and its value. Let's start off with a simple addition formula. We're going to calculate the total budget for June and July. However, instead of entering these numbers, in other words 1200 plus 1500, we're going to use cell references. Here's how it works. First, select the cell where you want the total to appear. Then type an equal sign, which is how you always start a formula. Next, type the addresses of the cells you want to add. In this example, D10 plus D11. Notice how the cells you've entered are actually highlighted in your worksheet, so you can easily confirm the contents of your formula. When you're ready, press Enter on your keyboard, and Excel will display the answer. Now, you may be wondering why we used cell references instead of numbers. It's because they give you the ability to change your original values without having to retype your formula. Excel automatically recalculates the answer, so it's always up to date. For that reason, you should try to use cell references whenever you can. To edit your formula, all you have to do is double-click the cell. If you make a mistake or change your mind, you can press Escape on your keyboard, and it'll go back to the way it was. Let's try another example, this time with multiplication. I want to calculate the total price for plastic silverware, so I'll need to multiply B4 by C4. Once again, start by typing an equal sign. But instead of entering the addresses manually, we're going to use something called the point and click method. Just click the cell you want, and the address instantly appears in your formula. Most people find this much easier than typing out the cell addresses by hand. When you're done, press Enter, and the answer appears. Finally, I want to show you a quick way to add a formula to several cells at once, specifically these 3 cells. Instead of retyping the formula above, we're just going to select the first cell, then locate the fill handle in the bottom right corner. Click and drag the handle down, and when you let go, the formula appears automatically in all 3 cells. Now we can see the total cost for each item. This is a great shortcut for duplicating formulas if you plan to use the same one more than once. Formulas really are one of the most powerful and convenient features in Excel. Now that you know how to use them, they can help you calculate all kinds of useful data.
All right. Next one, let's see. Which one was this? I believe it is absolute and relative cell references. Okay, let's go for it. There we go.
Goodwill Community Foundation, creating opportunities for a better life. There are 2 main types of cell references in Excel, relative and absolute. Both behave differently when copied to other cells, either as part of a formula or a function. Relative references are the default, and probably the type you're going to use for most of your formulas. In this example, I need to know the total cost of each menu item on the invoice. To do this, I'll need to multiply the values in these 2 cells. I'll just enter my formula here. Start by typing the equal sign, and then the formula will be B4 times C4. When you're done, press Enter on your keyboard. Now if I use the fill handle to copy this formula to all of these cells, we can double-click each copy and see that the cell references have changed automatically. So we have B5, B6, B7, and so on. That's because these are relative references. In other words, when Excel looks at our original formula, what it actually sees is the location of the cells relative to the location of the formula. That means in this case, it's looking at the 2 cells to the left of our current location, and those just happen to be B4 and C4. Each copy is also looking at the 2 cells to the left of the formula. This technique is useful because it means we can copy the formula as we did here, and the cell references will sort of move along with it. The references don't even have to be in the same row. They can be anywhere in the sheet. There may be times when you don't want the cell references to change. Take this version of the invoice. I've added a column where we can list the sales tax for each item. We should be able to enter our formula here, then copy it to the rest of the list. To get started, I'm going to enter B4 times C4 in parentheses. Then I'm going to multiply by cell E2, which contains our tax rate at 7.5%, which is the same as 0.075. Next, I'll use the fill handle to copy the formula to the rest of these cells. But wait, that doesn't look right at all. It's even affecting the formulas in the rest of the worksheet. The first copy of our formula is correct because it's multiplying by E2, which contains our tax rate. But as we go down the list, we can see that the reference is moving in relation to the cells, which isn't what we want. We want it to stay frozen on E2 for each copy of the formula, and for that, we'll need to use an absolute reference. Absolute references have a $sign placed before the column, row, or both to keep them from changing when you copy the formula to another cell. To keep the column and the row from changing, place a $sign in front of both. To keep only the row from changing, place a $sign in front of the row only. To keep only the column from changing, place a $sign in front of the column. Most of the time, you'll be using the first type of absolute reference, the one where there's a $sign before the column and the row. Let's go back to our example and add $signs before the column and the row to make E2 an absolute reference. Now if we copy the formula to the rest of this list, the errors go away and we're left with the correct sales tax for each item. The relative reference is different in each cell, but the E2 reference, our absolute reference, stays the same. Finally, I'd like to show you how to create cell references across different worksheets in the same workbook. This can be useful if you want to create a formula on one worksheet that references a value from another. It works the same as a normal reference. You just have to include the name of the worksheet along with the cell address. So to get started, figure out what cell you want to use, then take note of its location. In this example, we're going to use cell E14 on the worksheet menu order. Next, switch to the worksheet where you want to use the reference. As you can see, I already have a formula that's calculating the total of all these services. I just need to add the total for the menu order in this cell here. To reference the cell, type the name of the worksheet first, then an exclamation point, and finally the cell address. If the worksheet name includes a space, like in this example, you'll need to add single quotation marks around the name. When you're done, press enter, and Excel will pull the value from the other worksheet. That means if cell E14 ever changes on the menu order worksheet, it'll be updated here too. Mastering cell references is the key to creating formulas that work for you and your data. Now you know how to use relative references, absolute references, and references across multiple worksheets.
All right, we have one final one. I believe this one is how we use functions in Excel. Very handy feature as well.
Goodwill Community Foundation, creating opportunities for a better life. Functions are a great time-saving option for calculating data in your worksheet. They can be used in place of formulas when a formula would be too long or just too complicated to write out manually. To access the function library, go to the Formulas tab on the ribbon. Here you'll find hundreds of functions to choose from. They've all been organized into categories to make them easier to find. For example, under Financial, you'll find functions that deal with things like interest and monthly payments. Under Text, you can perform text manipulations, like converting lowercase to uppercase, replacing text, and more. Date and Time includes functions that return the current date, time, day of the week, and other useful data. Some of the most common functions are pretty simple though, like sum and average. You can access these using the drop-down arrow under AutoSum. In this example, I'd like to add these 10 cells to calculate the total. If I tried to create a formula for that, I'd have to add each cell individually. Not only would that be tedious, it would also make the formula really long, especially if I had, say, 100 cells that I wanted to add. So instead of creating a formula, I'm going to use a function. First, select the cell where you want the answer to appear. Then choose a function. In our case, we'll open the AutoSum menu, and then choose Sum. Now Excel has inserted the function and also selected the cells that are being added together. If it selects the wrong cells, you can always change that by dragging the corner handles here. When you're done, press Enter on your keyboard, and the answer will appear. Let's look at this function in a little more detail. Just like formulas, functions always start with an equal sign. But you may have noticed that there are no mathematical operators, such as addition or subtraction, like you would normally see in a formula. Instead, functions use a specific syntax that includes the name of the function, followed by one or more arguments in parentheses. The arguments tell the function which cells or numbers to use when calculating the result. In this example, we only have one argument, even though there are two different cell references. This is called a range of cells, or a cell range. A cell range is represented by two different cell references with a colon in between. In this case, the range consists of all the cells between B3 and B12. If you want to use more than one argument, you'll need to separate each one with a comma. Let's try a different function now. In this example, we have a column for the date that each item was ordered and the date that it was received. What I'd like to know is how many business days it took for each item to be delivered. First, select the cell where you want the function to go. Then choose a function if you know what category it's in. If you don't, you can try searching for it instead. Just click the Insert Function command on the far left of the ribbon. Searching for functions can be tricky, but for more experienced users, this can be an extremely useful tool. Just type a description of the function you're looking for. I'm looking for something that will count the number of days that have elapsed, so I'll type count days and then press enter. We've gotten a lot of different results here. To learn more about a function, just click the name, and a description will appear below. The function called net workdays returns the number of workdays between two dates, and that's exactly what we want. So I'm just going to click OK, and another dialog box will appear. There will be separate fields for each argument in the function. This function has up to 3 arguments: start date, end date, and holidays. When you click a field, you'll see a description of it below. And if you need more help, you can click the link that says Help on this function. For the start date, I'm going to select cell E3. And for the end date, I'll select F3. We know the holidays argument is optional because it's not in bold, so I'm going to leave that one blank. Before you continue, you can check the result of the function here. When you're ready, click OK, and the function will be added to the worksheet. Just like with formulas, you can copy the function using the fill handle here. And now we can see the number of business days it took for each item to be delivered. If you've never used functions before, the syntax may seem a little strange at first. But with some practice, you're bound to get the hang of it, and soon you'll be using your favorite functions over and over.
All right, there you go. All right, so that is Excel. And since we have that fresh in our minds, we're going to go ahead and open up the data that is provided for you for this exercise and it's Excel data. So if you go to the module, you'll see class survey Excel data. All right, so go ahead and click that open. And it should go into your downloads folder. So go ahead and find that and open it up. And for Excel, you're always, whenever you open it up, you will often see a yellow box appear at the top, and you'll see enable editing. You will not be able to do anything in an Excel worksheet unless you enable it. So go ahead and click on that button. It went over there. Open it. All right. And we'll open our Excel worksheet. All right. So, just as a refresher, if we go back to what we learned in chapter 1, we can sort of understand what's in our Excel worksheet, right? And for our data, we have variables, the data itself, the data set, and a datum, right? And so going through here, each one of these columns would be called a variable because the answers can vary from person to person. And when we say data, it's a plural word, right? It's the collective measurements and observations of a variable. So all the data for this particular question is located in this column. And then if we say a data set, that includes everything that's in our Excel worksheet here. And then if you remember, a datum is singular. So that would be referencing just what is contained in each individual cell. All right, so for our data, you can see that we have all of this came from questions on a survey. And in order for us to understand it, if we go ahead and look at the survey that this came from, we can see the questions that were created for this particular, oops, I'm on the wrong one. Okay, for this particular data set, it came from the survey, this class survey that was asked of all the students, many of my students. And in it, they provided several things like their name, which I removed for confidentiality purposes, their birth dates and gender and their marital status and their liking for different things like sports, school, math. If they liked it, they answered a 3. If they didn't much care for it, they answered a 2. If they disliked it, they answered a 1 in these areas. For the other four of these questions, it was asking about, their level of shyness or how outgoing they are. And the first one, it said, I consider myself to be shy. I love to go to parties and be with people. I like to be alone most of the time. I consider myself to be outgoing. And then some other questions as well. All right. So you can see how questions on a survey look when they're recorded and saved in the data sheet that sort of is behind it, right? So here is that date of birth question, that gender question, marital status, those like how much they like things, right? So remember 1s, 2s, and 3s, 3 being that they liked it, and etc. All right. So if we go back to our chapter, let me find it. All right. So let's see. Let's remind ourselves here where we're at. Um, We also learned about the different kinds of data types, right? And I wanted us to be able to go and look into our data and determine or be able to identify whether a variable is continuous or if it's categorical. And it would be also very helpful if you understand whether it's an interval or ratio or if it's ordinal or nominal, right? So remember, interval data has no true zero, whereas ratio does, meaning zero means that there's none of something, right? And so as far as date of birth goes, that's an age. And you really can't have zero age. Someone always has some kind of amount of time that they've been on this earth. So that would be an interval, or pardon me, a ratio data. And if we look at the gender variable, that would be categorical, or we might call it dichotomous, like your book often refers to it. And this would be nominal because there's no real order to it. Um, as far as these liking for questions, I would call these categories, right? Either people fell into the category of disliking, not caring, or liking each of these areas, right? Whether it's school or math, etc. And let's see, I don't believe we have, yeah. So as far as any interval data there, this particular data set doesn't really have it. All right. So overall, this data set contains both categorical and continuous data. All right, so finally, to move along here, we're going to go ahead and go back to our chapter and recall that we talked about, we had different notations that we're learning about, and one of them was N, and that is the number of scores that you have either in a population or in a sample. And if it's a sample, it's a lowercase n. And since this is only one class, one statistics class, and the data set that comes from one statistics class, I would say this is a sample, and n equals 38. You might be asking yourself, how did I arrive at 38 when the last row of data was 39? And by the way, just to remind you, each row of data represents one person's answers to all of the questions that was on a survey. The reason I know that it's only 38 is because the first row is actually the titles for each of the columns. So I needed to subtract that from the total. So n equals 38 for this data set. And then finally, let me go back. Finally, the last thing I wanted to touch on as far as this data set goes is calculating sigma scores, right? We learned how sigma stands for summation. And so that is something we will be doing quite often in our class. And so we want to know how you do summation in a data set. So let's see, I want to go ahead and we'll look at the very last column. And this is a step that you will now be performing for this data set. So make sure your data set is out and open and ready so we can perform this technique, because you will save this Excel worksheet and that's what you turn in for this assignment. All right, along with what we're going to do in SPSS. All right, so I am going to highlight the cell below all of the answers in the likelihood of doing well in this course. Okay, and if you recall from those little Excel videos, we looked at formulas, right? And I could actually click on auto sum and select sum if I wanted to. And once I do that, I see that it has that has correctly identified the scores that I want to sum, and it's placed it in there, right? And if you remember from the video, you can change where it's selecting by moving it up here. Just make sure you place your cursor over the fill handle in the corner so that you can move it around. I could even grab this whole highlighted area by placing my cursor towards the edge of it and waiting till the arrows all in all four directions show up, click, and then move it over if I wanted to. All right. But I'm going to keep it there, and then I'm going to hit enter. All right. Simple as that. Right? There's other ways you can do it. You can also hit the equal sign, just type out sum, and go ahead and do that yourself just to practice. Start the parentheses, and then I'm going to select the data that I want to sum, and so it starts at the bottom of these answers. And then I'm going to click that bottom answer and drag it up until I go to the very first answer. And then I'm going to finish the formula. After I get to the top, I let go and I go back down into the formula and end the parentheses and then hit enter. And voila. There's a final way you can do sum, which is not typically the way we do it because it can be difficult. If you place your cursor over, let's try another column. We're going to place it under the column that's next to that one, or before the column that's before the last one here. And I'm going to hit the equal sign. You can do that. And then I can highlight that last figure. And then I can hit the plus sign on my keyboard and then highlight the next one. And if I kept doing that, I could eventually highlight all of them, right? I'm not going to do that. Only do the last three in this example for your part. And then just hit enter. All right, that's the exercise for Excel this time. So go ahead and go to the File tab at the top left corner and save as, and save it to a place on your computer where you can find it so you can add it to your comment to this exercise, okay? All right, that is Excel. So let's do a little review of how of SPSS. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and open that program. And I'm just going to kind of go over it a little bit or really quickly. We'll do sort of just a brief overview. We'll get more in depth as the semester goes along, and maybe a little more next time we do this. But once you open up SPSS, you'll notice this little splash screen open up. And this is there so that you can, find data that you want to work on. It may already be listed here. If you hit recent files, you might find the data that you were using previously, and you can quickly pull it in using this splash screen. I'm not going to use it right now, or you could hit open another file. If I highlight that and hit open, I can navigate to a file that I want to use to open it in SPSS. But I'm going to show you how to do it if you're not using this splash screen, because you're not always going to. By closing that, and you should too as well once you have this open. And I'm going to go to File, Import. All right, if you recall, the data that we have for this exercise was Excel data. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate towards it. I'm going to import that data, tell it that I want to open an Excel file, and mine is in the Downloads folder. If you don't see the Downloads folder up here where it says Look In, you can navigate to it by selecting where it's located on your folder. So if I go to C and I go to Users, my name, I can find my Downloads folder And here is that data file that went into my downloads folder when I clicked it in Canvas. Okay, so I'm going to highlight that and I'm going to click open. And every time you input or import a data file that's not an SPSS folder or file, say it's an Excel file or it's a CSV file, you will see this little box open up. And that's because it needs your help to read the data that you were trying to put into SPSS. So here you can see that, yes, it does look like the data that we had opened in Excel. If I go back, you can see, it had the date of birth, gender, etc., with the names at the columns. I'm going to click that off. Um, and you can also see that it seems to be aligned correctly. The titles are up there. And so you can click OK. But if for some reason it looks all mixed up for you, which it shouldn't, you will see a button here that says Data Wizard, right? And you can click that and it will give you several options to organize the data correctly. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And my data popped up. I also want to give you an example of if you open up a file that doesn't look correct, what the steps you need to take to get it to go in correctly so you can use it. And I just happen to have a file that does just that. So let me navigate towards that so you can see. Let me see. It's going to take a second here for me to get to it. All right. All right. Um, aha, here we go. All right. All right. So now here I opened up, this is the same data actually, but it's in a CSV file and it gives me a preview of it. And you can see all the data is not neatly laid out like it looked in the previous one. So, it, so it's all kind of jumbled up and mixed up. So I'm going to go ahead and open the Advanced Options text wizard. And so far, the preview is still not looking good, right? So I'm going to go ahead and hit next. And it gives you several options to select to make sure to help adjust it correctly. And it wants to know, is your variables arranged, how they're arranged. And this is a delimited file. Usually CSV files are. Are variable names included at the top? Yes. What is the decimal symbol? It is a period. So far, so good. The first case of data begins on which line number? It is the second line that our data begins because the top line are the titles to our columns, remember? And it says, how are your cases represented? Each line represents a case. That's true. How many cases do you want to import? I want all of them. So I'm going to click next. So far, so good. Now it's starting to look pretty organized. Look at that. The titles are in the correct places. They don't look so unorganized. It is correctly establishing that I'm using a comma to separate the variables. So I don't need to make any changes really. So I'm just going to click next again and uh-oh, it's giving me a warning. And this just means that they found a name for the variable that isn't accepted by SPSS. So it's going to change the name so it's accepted for SPSS. What it probably means is there's probably a space in the name or a character that it won't accept, so it'll change it so it can import it. So just click OK and then click next. Everything still looks okay, so I'm going to click finish. And voila. Well, what happened here? Well, I had this box pop out, and this may have happened to you the first time I imported data, but you'll see a box that looks something like this. For SPSS, this is what it does when every time you do a new thing in SPSS, it records every step you take and every statistical function that you perform. it will put it out in what is called the output. Let me show you. So the first form where you see the data is called the data sheet. The other one that pops up after you maybe imported your data is called the output. All right. And you want to keep them both open, but you can navigate between the two. So this is just sort of pops up and says, here's what you just did, right? And this is syntax that SPSS actually performs to do its functions. All right, I'm going to minimize my output. And I'm going to go back and look at the SPSS interface. Now, this should look familiar to you. This looks a whole lot like that Excel form, right? You see all the columns, which were the questions from the survey that we saw. And then each row was each person's answers to the questions on the survey. Now, there's a little more to it for SPSS. You'll notice there are symbols on each of these variables. And remember, each column is a variable. And they tell you what kind of data it is. And we'll go over what those symbols mean, but this is telling you whether you have categorical or continuous data. You should be warned, though, whenever you first put in new data into SPSS, sometimes it guesses the type of data that it is incorrectly. For example, the likelihood of getting divorced or of getting rich, pardon me, that was what the question was in the past. Now the question is the likelihood of people were asked how likely do they think that they would get rich, and then the likelihood that they think others would get rich, and then they're asked the likelihood from 0 to 100 for all of these of them doing well in this course. All right, and really they were all using the same scale, right? Answering from 0 to 100. And this would be continuous scale. And it would be a ratio because 0 means none of it, right? So for the last one, it correctly perceived it to be continuous, but these two, it did not. The bubbles are trying to say they think it's a categorical variable, and that's incorrect. So we'll have to fix that. For the first one, it also has a ruler, and it's got a little picture next to it. And that means this is continuous data, but it's a date. All right, and that's true. It's correctly identified that. You'll see bubbles as well. And I've already mentioned these are determining that these are categories, right? Um, and we also see bubbles here, but it has an A next to it. When you see bubbles with an A, it's saying it's a category, but it's text data. All right, and that's true. This is this is a males and females, the gender at birth, and it is in text. However, for these categories, for answering 1, 2, and 3, they're liking for, I would say these are more ordinal variables, right? They have an order, but they're really still categories, whether someone likes, dislikes, or doesn't care about these topics. And then there was questions that were related to shyness, right? And there was 4 of those. And you could answer on a scale of 1 to 5. And personally, I would be inclined to categorize these as continuous variables as well, right? Okay, so that is the data view, which you can see the tab for data view in the lower left-hand corner here. And the reason they call it data view is because we are looking at the data and everyone's answers. However, if I go to variable view, now it's showing me something entirely different. It's showing me information about each of the variables, where on data view, each column of data is, represented going up and down here, but those columns are now represented going across. And so, for example, date of birth, this area of SPSS is there for us to tell SPSS all about each of our variables and how to treat them, right? And there's different options related to each variable. And if this is not coded correctly, if something is not put in correctly, you will not be able to perform statistical analysis, some statistical analysis. If you, for example, have given it if it's under the wrong measure, like these last ones, the shyness scores as well as the likelihood scores, you will be limited to what kind of analysis you can do. And in fact, the analysis that it will let you perform will be wrong because these are not categorical data. So if I go to the first shyness question, I want to list it as a continuous score. If I click it, you'll notice I have three possible options, and none of them are called continuous. That's confusing. Well, SPSS lumps together ratio and interval data into scale data. It treats them both the same. So if that variable is either a ratio or an interval, you can list it under scale. So it can be identified as a continuous variable in SPSS. So I'm going to do that for all of these. And in fact, if I do it for one and I hit right click, copy, and then highlight for the other ones, I can right click, paste, and do several of them all at once. Pretty cool, huh? The other thing you should note for variable view is now you can see here where it in Excel form, it said date of birth and there were spaces between date of birth. There are no spaces here now. That's because there's sort of some rules about how your variables can be named in this column. And there cannot be any like spaces or dashes or colons. It can only be numbers and letters that are allowed here in the name. And so sometimes you get something that looks all squished up like this and kind of hard to read, right? So they also provide you an area where you can label correctly your data here using spaces and other characters. So if I can now put date of birth, right? And just to demonstrate it to you, if I try to go over here and do the same thing, date of birth and hit enter, up, it gives me a warning. Variable name contains an illegal character, right? And it went back to the way it was spelled. So that was that error when we were using the data transform wizard that it was referring to. It was changing all those spaces. It was removing all the spaces in the names of the variables. The other next thing it does is it has you, like we already talked about how we need to determine what kind of measure a variable is. We also have to tell it what type of data it is. And if you click in the type next to one of your variables, it gives you several options, right? And for that first one, it is a date, and it is saying, yes, it's a date, and you can actually format it the way you prefer. And I happen to like the way it is, so I'm going to leave it alone. And that's available for each one of these. And I would say all of the rest of them are numeric except for these two. If you recall, if I go back to data view, these are not numbers, right? And it has correctly identified them as string variables. And in SPSS, string refers to text data, right? All right. And text data is typically identified as nominal. The other thing I noticed, the measures for these, remember we said those were ordinal. So let's correct those and we'll go back to, let's see, sports was the first one. And we'll tell it, yes, that's an ordinal data. So I'm going to select ordinal. I am going to, oops, I have to click out of it and then hover, right click, copy. And now I'm going to highlight the rest of them, right click, paste. All right, hopefully you're following along and you're making these changes to the measure area and so on. All right, so let's see. As far as that, what we are currently doing right now is referred to as coding your data. You're cleaning up and coding the data in SPSS. The next column here is the width of a variable, and that just means how many spaces are allowed for this particular data. And you might be wondering, why does SPSS even care how many spaces are allowed in your data set? Well, good question. The reason is because sometimes data sets can be extremely large. In fact, uh, in my job for the social services agency, we often deal with millions of rows of data, especially for like Medi-Cal. I can have several million spaces, rows of data for all of our clients. As you can imagine, that data file will be huge. So, in order to save on space that you save your files for, and for your files not to become too large and unwieldy, you can limit how much space is allowed for each of your variables to sort of narrow it down as small as possible, right? And so if you remember for sports, there was only um, options for 1, 2, and 3. So it only needs one space. And so for all of these, it only needed one space. When we imported our data, SPSS automatically counted what was the largest possible answer. And for marital status, it was up to 13. Okay, so for decimal points, you can also tell SPSS how many decimal points you want to allow for a variable. If you notice, none of our data seem to have any decimal points. If I go to the end, you can see there's no decimal points, but let's say I want to give this last one 2 decimal points. I'm going to go ahead and go back and see now it is allowing for 2 decimal points. I'm going to undo that because there really are no decimal points for that. And let's see, the next one, this is something I want you to do also. So far, you should have change the measurement scales to match what I have here. And this is the next thing I want you to do. I want you to identify the values for these ordinal variables, right? Remember, it was 1 for dislike, 2 for don't care, and 3 for like, for sports, school, etc. Okay, so for that first one, for sports, in the values, click on the first one. And yours might look a little different. You might see the layout for value labels box laid out a little bit different, but essentially it's the same thing. In your area for value, put in the number that you want to code for. So for ones, I want SPSS to understand the label for that is don't like. All right. And for you, you'll see a button here that says add, remove, or change. Click add. And I'm going to do it for twos. And that's going to be don't care. And I'm going to do for threes, like. All right. So you should have added all of these options and then click OK. All right, great. I've got sports done. Wouldn't it be a pain if we had to do that for every single one? Thankfully, we don't. I'm going to click out of it. So now that I can copy this. So I'm going to hover, don't click, but hover over it so it's not highlighted. Or while it's not highlighted, just hover your cursor over it and then just hit the right click button. Right click, copy. If you're having trouble with that, you can highlight it, go to edit, and then click copy. But if you can pull that one off, go ahead and do so. Now I have it copied, and I'm going to highlight the rest of these like so. So hover over the first one, click, and then drag until you come to the last one, which is video games. All right, they're all highlighted. I'm going to right click over it and paste. Voila, we have them all coded now. Great, right? Awesome. Okay, that's enough coding for today. So you should have made changes in the measures. and you should have made changes in the values. And now we're going to hit analyze. We're going to learn how to do sum like we did in Excel in SPSS. So go to analyze and then find descriptive statistics and then descriptives. All right, so when we're talking about summing data, we're usually we only sum data when it is a continuous variable, right? We don't typically sum categories, right? That doesn't really make any sense. Like if I had red, blue, and green outfits, how would I, and those are the categories for that, or even gender, right? How would I sum gender at birth? It doesn't make sense, right? Those are categories. Although these ordinals are assigned numbers, they're still categories. All right. And it also doesn't make sense to sum date of birth as well. All right, so maybe let's go to the very last one, the likelihood of doing well in this course, just like we did for our demonstration in Excel. And I'm going to highlight it, the very last one. I'm going to put it in the variables box. I'm going to click options. And you notice some things are automatically listed for us, or selected for us. And that's because in statistics, these are typically what people want to see, but we haven't gone into those yet. We'll do those soon. And we're going to unclick them, and we're just going to do sum. All right, click into that, click continue, and then click OK. All right, very good. And you can see we got the same number. 3,051 was the sum. All right, and you can see that the outcome of that, what I did was just put into our output box. All right, our output pop-up. Great. Well, I'm going to minimize that, and we're going to do a couple of more things to code our data. And if you recall, we have two variables here that are text. There's a problem with text when we're talking about SPSS, and that is SPSS doesn't know what to do with text. It cannot perform statistical analysis with text, but it can with numbers. So we have to code these into numbers. So if I go to transform and I recode into different variables, I will see a box like this come up. And I want to change, we're going to change gender at birth. And now we want to give it a name. And remember, in the variable view, the name is what goes here. So there cannot be any spaces or characters other than letters or numbers. So I'm going to put gender, no space, and then recode. All right, now I can put a space for label, right? Because that's right here. All right, so I'm going to put gender space recode and hit change. So once I get this done, it will give me a new column with a name of gender recode, no space, and a label of gender recode with a space. Now I want to tell it what the old and new variables are. So click this button that says old and new variables, and you should see this pop up. All right, so the old value, let me go back to data view. Oh no, well, wait, hold on, let me go back here. Okay, so the old value must match the way it's spelled in SPSS exactly. So if I write MALE, but I do not capitalize the M, SPSS will not recognize it as males. It will not count any of it will not change any of them, right? If your words have capitals in them, you need to also put the capitalized letters in them. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and put male with a capital, and I'm going to assign them a new value of 1. And I'm going to click add. And same thing with female. And I'm going to assign them a value of 2, and then I'm going to click add. Now that's all. Click continue. and then click OK. All right, this popped up, and it's just because we did another function in SPSS, and a lot of times it will tell you what it did. I don't have mine set up to actually say it, but sometimes it'll add the syntax that was used to perform the function. So I'm going to minimize that again. And we're going to go ahead and look at our new column first. And you can see it added decimal points to it, but now they're ones and twos. Yes. All right, so I'm going to go here and remove the decimal points. And I also want to do that for my marital status for never married, married, divorced. All right, so we're going to go to transform, recode into different variables. And I'm going to reset, and I'm going to put marital status in there. And I'm going to put the label. So marital status, recode, marital status, recode, one with and one without the spaces, hit change, click old and new, and I'm gonna put, let's see, how about divorced? All right, let's see here. Yeah, let's do divorced is, how about one, add. And divorced is one. And then how about never married? Make sure you put the capitals in there because this has capitals, and we'll make them twos. And then we'll give married threes. All right, three. All right, add. Awesome. Now hit OK. And you can see this popped up again. Let's minimize it. And you can see our new column. And it gave me decimal points again. So let's go to variable view, move those decimal points. Now those columns are, now they are numbers, but I don't want to forget what the numbers are, right? Before I forget, I'm going to go to marital status, and I'm going to code those numbers. So for ones, those were my divorced individuals. For twos, those were my never married individuals. And for threes, they were my married individuals. If I don't do that, I'll forget what what I numbered them. All right. All right. And it'll also come out nicely when we do statistical analysis, showing you what each number stood for, right? And let's just do the gender as well. So I'm going to go click the value labels for gender. Ones were male. Oops, sorry, male. And twos were female. All right. All right. And click OK. Now, if I go back to data view, you'll see my decimal points are not there. And also, if you click this little symbol up here that has an A and a 1 in it, you'll see what all the work that we've been doing for recoding there. If you click it, it switches over to what we named those categories: never married, female, etc., right? The likes and don't likes. And click it back, and there's the numbers again. Pretty cool, right? All right, so I think that'll do it for this time around. Like I said, right now we're learning how to clean and code the data, and this first and maybe the next one will probably be a little longer than what we typically will need for these videos. So just hang in there with us. What I want you to do with these two files, so you can turn them in, let's see. For the data file, go to File. Let's see. I want to do that. No. Actually, what I want you to do is, okay, so there's something else you should know as far as, typically I do not want you turning in SPSS files, but while we're doing the cleanup, I want you to be able to turn in the SPS file so you can show me that you've done the cleanup. So something you should know in SPSS, if I am in the data part file and I hit something in the tab, or if I hit save in the tab, it will save the data, right? So I'm going to hit save, and I'm going to put this in my downloads folder so I can find it later. You can put it in your documents, wherever you like. Let me go to where my downloads folder is. All right. And you can see it's labeled as a SAV folder. SAV tells me that this is an SPSS data file. And I'm going to name it, what are we going to call it? So week one. Week one SPSS beta. All right. Hit save. You'll turn that one in along with the Excel file. And I want the output file, but I want you to do something a little different with the output file. Go to the output file so I can see that you did the summation. And this is where I want you to turn in a Word document. It just makes it easier to read in Canvas. So click on File, and then we want to find Export. Okay. And you should see this pop up. We want to tell it what kind of file to save it as. And for this, we want it to be a docx. So find docx and then browse to where you want it to be saved. And I'm going to have it saved in my downloads file. And we'll name it the same thing. What was it? Week one. One SPSS data. And then just save it. All right, to that location. Once you have the place and the kind of document, you can just click OK. All right, and it'll save it for you in there. And if I open that up, I'll show you what it looks like. I found my downloads folder, and you can see here is that output. You can see all the syntax that SPSS used, but then you can see some of the functions I did, this summation that we did right here. And it gave us N as well, if you recall. All right. And if I open the other one, let me close that. Let's see if I open the other one, that SAV folder, you'll see it right there. Voila, there is my SPSS data file. So what you'll be turning in is that SAV folder, that docx, and that Excel file with all the changes you made that we did together. All right, it was great hanging out with you. I'll see you next